Mastering influence, the power of absence. Consider the most impactful figures throughout history. Often, they maintain a certain level of detachment. Monarchs operate behind palace walls, the ultra-wealthy rarely engage publicly, and leaders strategically recede from the spotlight at pivotal moments. This isn't accidental reclusiveness or an attempt to appear enigmatic. It's a deliberate tactic. What if consistent overexposure actually diminishes your influence without you even realizing it? Today, we're exploring the concept that being less present, less vocal, and less readily available can be far more powerful than constant visibility and accessibility. Drawing from historical figures and modern psychological insights, you'll discover how strategically creating distance can amplify influence, generate attraction, and even inspire a degree of respect. Pay close attention, as this understanding can significantly reshape your interactions. A notable historical thinker observed that individuals held in high regard are less susceptible to opposition. However, such regard doesn't stem from being perpetually present or easily reached. Rather, it originates from a sense of distance, the perception of someone being slightly out of reach, and the feeling of their absence. This individual understood that those in positions of authority must carefully manage their appearances, not by disappearing entirely, but by being seen selectively and at carefully chosen times. In their view, constant visibility wasn't a strength but a weakness. It erodes authority, diminishes intrigue, invites excessive scrutiny, and weakens overall impact. Overfamiliarity can not only dispel mystique but also foster a lack of respect. However, this idea predates this historical figure. Ancient wisdom suggests that a sage, by remaining in the background, paradoxically moves ahead. This philosophy wasn't about overt force or aggressive assertion, but about subtlety, restraint, and quiet influence. In this perspective, true power wasn't loud or attention-seeking. Its impact was felt more than it was outwardly displayed. The less one overtly acts, the more is often accomplished. The less one is constantly present, the more one is likely to be remembered, a seemingly contradictory yet enduring truth. By strategically withdrawing, a sense of pull is created. By holding back, others are drawn in. This state of stillness isn't passive, it's a deliberate strategy. Contemporary psychological research supports this long-standing wisdom. The principle of scarcity highlights that we tend to value things more when they are perceived as rare or less available. Human psychology is such that we are often driven to pursue what seems to be slipping away or to desire what isn't easily obtained. We often develop an idealized perception of distance and become more focused on what is not readily accessible. The individual who is perpetually available often becomes an afterthought. Conversely, the one who occasionally becomes unavailable gains a certain weight, transforming into an enigma that sparks curiosity. The unknown holds a far greater allure than that which is constantly on display. You've likely experienced this in your own life. That friend who always agrees, who is always ready to assist or socialize. Eventually, their efforts go unnoticed and gratitude morphs into expectation. That colleague who is perpetually online and responds instantly, their time begins to be taken for granted. However, the person who occasionally declines, who establishes boundaries, who isn't constantly accessible, their presence is noted when they do appear, and their attention feels like a deliberate choice, not an automatic response. This is where respect begins to develop, where influence starts to take root, not in constant presence, but in purposeful absence. Consider a historical example. In the 17th century, King Louis XIV of France mastered this principle perhaps better than anyone. He positioned himself as the focal point of court life, the literal sun king around whom the nobility orbited. Yet, while his influence permeated everything, his physical presence was carefully managed. His schedule was a public spectacle, but audiences with him were rare and strictly controlled. His periods of silence amplified the impact of his words. and his distance transformed his attention into a highly prized commodity. Nobles became consumed with seeking fleeting glimpses, interpreting gestures, and deciphering subtle signs of favor. He constructed an empire of influence by appearing less, not more. Even in the brutal logic of warfare, absence holds power. The Mongol general Subutai, a key strategist for Genghis Khan, was renowned for his army's ability to vanish from the landscape entirely, only to reappear unexpectedly with overwhelming force. It wasn't solely his tactics that instilled fear in his enemies. It was the uncertainty, the dread of not knowing his location or the timing of his next strike. He didn't just win battles, he cultivated a legend. His power resided not only in his actions, but also in what his adversaries imagined he was capable of. That is the power of seeming invisibility. Now contrast this with Napoleon Bonaparte, a man of immense charisma and skill, yet his downfall offers a different lesson. Following his initial exile, he returned from Elba with dramatic flair. However, his second reign, the 100 Days, quickly lost momentum. Why? Because he had reappeared too soon. The populace hadn't had sufficient time to forget his shortcomings. He returned before absence could transform defeat into legend. Instead of inspiring awe, he reminded people of the reality of his previous reign. He ultimately failed not due to a lack of strength, but because he had become too familiar. Reverence necessitates distance. A keen observer of human nature understood this danger, noting that those who battle monsters risk becoming monstrous themselves. But perhaps more subtly, they hinted at another truth. Excessive exposure to greatness diminishes its impact. The more frequently you encounter something, even something extraordinary, the more ordinary it becomes. Icons lose their power when they are constantly present in your awareness. Even deities, to maintain their divinity, must withdraw. Mystery isn't merely an aesthetic quality. It serves a functional purpose. It sustains reverence. Consider the artist who disappears after releasing one unforgettable album, or the romantic interest who creates space instead of constant communication. The leader who pauses before speaking understands the power of the unspoken. In every instance, what is withheld gains significance. The silence between actions, the space between appearances, this is where anticipation builds. Research in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology supports this, indicating that individuals find others more appealing when they are perceived as slightly less accessible. Not so distant as to appear uninterested, but just unavailable enough to spark curiosity. That subtle hint of uncertainty is often the catalyst. Even in the animal kingdom, this principle is evident. The alpha wolf doesn't constantly assert dominance through barking, growling, or fighting. Its power lies not in noise, but in its presence, appearing at the opportune moment to disrupt the established order, and then retreating. Its silence conveys authority, and its restraint amplifies its command. This type of control, appearing only when necessary and unexpectedly, is what compels others to fall in line. True power isn't about volume. It's about impact, and the less frequently it's overtly displayed, the more potent it becomes. Consider a more nuanced example from ancient Japan, where the samurai embraced yugen, a profound and subtle form of grace. It wasn't about ostentatious displays of skill or demanding attention. Rather, it focused on what remained unsaid, unseen, and unboasted. A truly skilled samurai didn't need to constantly prove their ability with every movement. Their aura spoke volumes, and mystery sharpened their edge. In that culture, constant presence could be perceived as a vulnerability, while absence held a certain reverence, even creating a sense of legend. Fast forward to the present day, and this pattern persists. Tech innovators sometimes disappear from the public eye for extended periods, only to return with a single statement that can dramatically influence markets. Celebrated artists withdraw from the spotlight, only to unexpectedly release groundbreaking work without prior announcement, creating a powerful impact through the contrast of quiet followed by a storm of influence. They don't chase attention, they orchestrate it. This dynamic even applies to personal relationships. Constant, immediate communication can diminish your significance. Being perpetually available can lead to your value being taken for granted. However, creating space and a degree of unavailability can shift this dynamic. Interest is heightened, and longing grows in the pauses between interactions. You become someone to be sought after, not someone who is always present. Desire thrives on absence. This isn't manipulation, it's an aspect of human nature. It's crucial to understand that absence isn't synonymous with abandonment, ego, or cruelty. It's about creating intentional space, a deliberate pause that allows your presence to gain weight and significance. It's implicitly communicating that your time and attention are valuable and not freely given. This isn't coldness. It's clarity, establishing a boundary that isn't meant to exclude but to underscore your worth. This isn't arrogance. It's the cultivation of gravity. So, how can you implement this? Begin by reclaiming your time. Practice saying no more often. Allow some messages to remain unanswered for a while. Allow some messages to remain unread for a period. Resist the urge to reply simply because you can. Refrain from explaining every action you take. Occasionally, choose to skip social gatherings. Allow people to become aware of your absence. Let them sense the void. That feeling of anticipation they experience is power coalescing. That silence amplifies your presence. Let them wonder about your whereabouts or the reason for your delayed response. Because in that moment, you've shifted the dynamic. You've become the pursued, not the pursuer. You become a rarity, and rarity in any era holds immense value. Don't just be present. Make your arrival significant. When you do appear, ensure it has impact. Speak deliberately, move with composure, and let your presence feel like a noteworthy occasion. This isn't about manipulation. It's about recognizing your self-worth. You are not obligated to provide constant access to everyone. Value your presence as a scarce commodity. If you are always readily available, your presence loses its value. However, if you are strategically rare, your presence becomes highly prized. And here's a fundamental truth. Power doesn't announce itself or seek validation. Power waits. It allows the world to gravitate towards it. Therefore, cease being so easily accessible. Step back, create space, and make your presence felt by making it infrequent. When you do appear, command the moment. People are not drawn to what is constantly within their reach. They are drawn to what they risk losing. This concludes this discussion. If you found this insightful, consider subscribing, giving it a positive rating, and sharing it with someone who could benefit from understanding the power of strategic withdrawal. Sometimes the most impactful action is to disappear. Thank you for your attention.